Yes, sir.
Hey, good deal. Come on up and preach for us. This is Brother Jonathan Powell, and glad that he and his family was able to be with us this year again, and as well as Brother Bobby. We got an open invitation next year, so go ahead and put us down. But we're glad to have him with us. Preacher, preach to us.
It was so good to be with y'all again. So thankful for the opportunity to get to hang out with you. Thank you, Pastor Beaver, for the kindness to Justin. We sure do appreciate the thoughtfulness of your church family. That's a blessing. To the ministry guests here, it's great to see you. I've enjoyed getting to know Pastor Carlson and got to meet or see again his wife. I'm not sure who I've met and when, but then the Thompsons. Glad to meet y'all. And Brother Andy, you and your family and the Moores have been a tremendous blessing. And so thankful for that music. That's a blessing. But Solid Rock family, we're so glad to get to be here with y'all. And I'm thankful for the ministry guests here. But this is about this community and this church family, and appreciate the encouragement from outside. But we're so excited that y'all are here, and so excited that you're being a part of what God is doing. And it matters, and it's significant. And we are thankful for it, and so honored to be a part of the celebration of that. And trust that by the grace of God, we can be an encouragement to you and remind you of some good truth. And Pastor, thank you again for preaching to us. It's a blessing. And appreciate your testimony and your transparency and your love for people. And it's just a good encouragement to me that we should never give up on anybody, because God wants to work in people's lives. That's a blessing. Well, let's open our Bibles to 1 Kings chapter 19. You've already done it once. Let's stand for just a moment. 1 Kings 19. I feel like this pulpit's a little too manly for me, so I don't feel like I've earned my stripes yet, so I still need one of those crybaby pulpits that you were talking about, Brother Stanchfield. So my Bible's not big enough for a son anyway. I'm just being silly. I'm glad that we can laugh. It's a blessing. All right, First Kings chapter 19. Chapter 18 was an amazing victory for the work of God. In a right way, not arrogantly, but God used Elijah to tear it up. And Elijah wasn't arrogant about this. Elijah stood for God. Elijah was loyal to God. And as a result, Elijah saw the demonstration of God's power. And aren't those amazing times when you can see God work? And it can be something as simple as, man, God help me to pass out a tract today. Or God let me have a victory over a habit. Or man, a guest I invited came to church. Or I got up and I taught a Sunday school lesson. Or I made this progress. But you see the fire come down and you see God work. And it's amazing. It's awesome. You know what else is amazing? How quickly that can all change. Please get it. In us. In us. Because God didn't change. From chapter 18 to chapter 19, God didn't change. But something happened in Elijah. I've heard guys preach on this, and I'm not trying to be disagreeable, but I've heard guys preach on this in a very derogatory way towards Elijah. Just essentially, man, we're just going to smoke Elijah and beat him up for being down. But here's the truth. We've all been there, and we're all susceptible to being there. And I don't see this text as God smoking Elijah. I see this text as God helping Elijah. And so there's two intentions with this. Number one, to know that there is a God in whom you can find help when you're in this place. Number two, to learn how to be that to other people. Can I encourage the church family? You need to learn how to be this to one another. You need to learn how to be this to your pastor. Pastors, we got to learn how to be this to the people of God. We got to learn how to be this to one another. Learn how to be this in our communities and to our neighbors. So chapter 19, verse number 1, and Ahab told Jezebel, because he's a really manly dude, and so he goes and he complains to his wife about all that Elijah had done, and with all how he had slain all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger unto Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me and more also, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. And when he saw that, he arose and went for his life. He feels the pursuit bearing down on him. He can feel the horse of Jezebel breathing down his neck. And he came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey to the wilderness, and came and sat down under a juniper tree. And he requested for himself that he might die, and said, it is enough. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers. I just want to talk to you for a little bit about the lies of discouragement, and we'll look at more in this chapter. Father, thank you for letting us be here. It's already been encouraging in so many ways. The singing is great, the congregational singing and the special singing. It's encouraging to me, and I'm thankful that we can praise you. And I'm so thankful for the ministry and the people that are here, and God, for the pastors that are here. I'm so thankful for the Beavers and for the way you've worked in them and through them and in Solid Rock Baptist Church. God, I'm thankful for this family, this family of faith that you have put here in this community. And God, I pray that you would use the truth, the thoughts this morning to be helped. You know that nothing good, God, you know that nothing good comes from me outside of you. And so I pray that you would use this time to be helpful in the lives of your people. In Jesus' name, amen. You may be seated. Thanks so much for standing. When we were driving in this morning from Jerome, when you look off to the northeast, and I don't remember what the mountain ranges are all called, but over to the northeast, somewhere in that vicinity, you have Bora Peak, which, as I assume many of you know, is the highest peak in Idaho. And so I had done some reading about that and found out it's the highest, and it pales in comparison, to some of the greater mountains in the world, but it's still our highest peak. And again, I told you this last night. I love Idaho, and I'm trying to learn about Idaho, and I'm thankful for it. And so, I learned about Bora Peak, and I told some of my kids, and I told my wife, we're climbing that someday. And so this past summer, they're not here, but my 3 oldest kids, and then one of the teen young ladies from our church. So I had 3 teen girls and my 16-year-old son, and we went and summited Bora Peak. And you're like, oh man, it can't really be that challenging. I'm not saying we climbed Mount Everest, and I don't remember the specific stats about it, but you start the climb at around 7,000 or 8,000 feet, and you summit somewhere around 12,600 or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but that's where you summit. So start around 8,000, summit around 12,000, but here's where it gets really hard. The hike up is only about 4 miles long. So you're gaining about 1,000 feet of elevation every single mile. Now look, I don't know if you've ever done anything like that, but it kind of takes your breath away. No, I mean, the views are awesome, but you can feel like, man, I am going to fall over right here, and then these teenagers are going to have to drag my pathetic body back down to the vehicle. And so we start off, and it was amazing. We're amped up, and I've got the camera out, and like, yeah, we're going to climb Mount Bora, and the sun. We had camped out in our vehicle in the parking lot, got there at like 2 in the morning, and then slept really well, so we were energized in the car. And then we get up, and we're getting ready to climb, and man, the 3 girls, they're all excited, and Jason, he's pumped up, and I'm like, yes, we're going to do this. It's going to be amazing. And then like a mile in, it's like, and then so you stop for a minute, and you get your breath, and then you start going again. And it was amazing. As you go up, there's a place called Chicken Out Ridge. And you can check out some YouTube videos on it. I showed Andrea before we did it, and she's like, I don't want to know what you're taking our children to do. Because it's not, I'm not talking like you're going to die, but there is some significant exposure there, and so you've got to do some scrambling. Then after you get over Chicken Out Ridge, you have this snow bridge, and where the sides of the mountain, they just kind of go like this, and then you have basically a couple of sidewalks length that you're traipsing over the snow. And then you get to that and you're like, we're almost done. And that's the worst part of the ascent right there. You know what's amazing is to feel, it just in my own heart, man, are we ever going to get there? And then to see it in my kids and just to watch the fluctuations. Like, this is amazing. This is horrible. Daddy, thank you for bringing us here. Daddy, why'd you do this to us? I mean, it's all over the place. 1 minute you're up here. 1 minute you're in chapter 18. You're seeing what God can do, and you're seeing the things that are possible, and you're seeing God move in amazing ways, and you're seeing a whole lot of people come, and you're seeing your family members not fight you, and you're seeing Brother Bill be nice to you, and you're seeing all of these things that are going on. You're like, man, I got a new pulpit, Brother Beaver, and man, it's amazing to have a pastor that loves me like this. But then you have those moments where it's like, get out of your house and go live in the church. My family doesn't really like me. Is anybody ever going to come? And we've got to understand this, that the Christian life, we're all full-time ministry. In this sense, we're all children of God. And maybe you're a pastor, maybe you're an assistant pastor, or maybe you work in a hospital, or you're a plumber, or you're a teacher, or whatever it is that you do. But we never lay our faith aside. So we're all full-time believers, and so in the moments of living out our faith, there are going to be some amazing chapter 18 moments where we see God do some really awesome stuff in our lives and bring blessing and deliverance and help that only He can do, and the fire comes down from heaven, and He works in amazing ways. But then we're going to come to chapter 19. You got to get this. Just because God does amazing things doesn't mean the enemy stops working. The opposition doesn't stop. Now, I love the encouraging singing, Brother Moore, about there is a heaven that is coming, and there is a Savior that has prepared it, and there is going to be nothing but good one day. But we're not in that day yet. And every victory is going to be met with a response from the enemy. And look, Ahab and Jezebel were dogs. They were wicked. They were vile. But they were just a manifestation of the enemy that is always behind it and stirring up the opposition to the man of God here, to the people of God in general. And so Elijah, he's battling all of this. He's encountering it over and over and over again. And this wasn't merely, I'm just going to take away your tax exempt status, or I'm going to raise your rent, or your utilities are going to go up. I'm going to make you like one of the prophets that you just killed. You are going to die. Please don't miss this, the full weight of that corrupt government had been brought to bear upon taking out Elijah. Every available resource. We're going to use it all to get rid of this one child of God. So Elijah finds himself in this moment to where he has poured himself into. And look, he wasn't perfect, but he was faithful. Amen. Look, it's not like he was sinless, but man, he was a faithful servant of God. And so he's poured himself into being faithful to the work of God, being faithful to the people of God, loving them, standing up for them. And when those corrupt, perverse false prophets were manipulating them and taking advantage of them and leading them astray, there's Elijah, and he is standing in opposition to them. He is standing up for God and standing up for God's people. And by the way, it's good to remember this, that if you're going to stand up for God, you're going to have to stand against some things. And in order to defend and help the people of God, you have to oppose certain influences in their life that they may not recognize, but they are for their harm and their evil. And so Elijah is faithful to stand against those influences. He's faithful to stand up for God. And at some point, let's just be honest, at some point, we just want the fighting to be done. Like I just want this to not be hard. I just want to be able to chill out for a minute. But the enemy doesn't stop. And so Elijah's had all these victories. He's dealing with people who are on again, off again. They're fired up for God one day, and then they're sacrificing their kids to Baal the next day. Just all over the place. And so he's dealing with the lack of consistency from the people of God. He's dealing with the oppression and the attempt of murdering him from a government, and he's just overwhelmed with it. And so in this moment in chapter 19, to where he leaves his servant in a town and he goes off into the wilderness about a day's journey, there are two lies that he believed that we can be susceptible to. Just two simple things. I'll deal with them quickly, but I really want to deal with how God helped him overcome them. The first lie was this. Look at verse number 4. He said, "It is enough now, Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers." Here was the idea. God, just kill me, because my life isn't really making a difference right now. Look, I did all of this, and Ahab and Jezebel are still coming. And unfortunately, look, we can't hide from this. Brothers and sisters, we can't hide from the pandemic of depression and suicide that is infiltrating every part of our culture. And you know how it used to be, they would say with cancer fundraisers, how many of you know someone that has cancer, or know someone that's died from cancer, and just everybody knows somebody? Well, suicide is becoming that way. And every liar in office that said it was healthier for people to stay away from each other than it was from them to be together, they have blood on their hands, because it's not helpful for people to isolate. I'm going to deal with that in a minute. But there are people that are plagued and overwhelmed, and they come to this conclusion: my life isn't making any difference. My life isn't, I'm no better than anybody else. God just go ahead and take me away. And maybe you're not on the verge of suicide, but you can render yourself useless for the work of God. You can render yourself useless in your marriage. You can render yourself useless with your children, whether they be in your home or they be adults. And man, so many parents feel the burden of children who have deviated from the way that they were raised. You raise them to love God, and yet they have to develop their own walk with the Lord. And children have to want to follow Jesus Christ as adults. And you can do everything right, and they can choose to go a different path. Hey, listen, please get this. There was only one perfect father, and his name was God, and his son disobeyed. Who are you talking about? Not Jesus. Adam. The Bible does refer to Adam as the son of God, not Jesus, but God created him and gave him a perfect environment, and he still disobeyed. Can I encourage parents who have wayward children? You can think, man, and maybe you did fail, because no parents are perfect. Only one. Maybe you did mess up along the way, but you've tried to point them to Jesus Christ and lead them, and you can think, man, what I'm doing isn't making any difference. Can feel that way as a pastor. Can feel that way as a soul winner. You can feel that way in your job. God, what I'm doing, it's not making any difference. And when you begin to think that, when you begin to only look at the small perspective that you have, you are going to be discouraged. So Here's Ahab, Jezebel, breathing down Elijah's neck. And you know what happens in that moment? He so quickly lost focus of the God that brought fire down. And now he just sees a king and a queen who hate God and are after him. So my life isn't making any difference. Number 2, second lie, I'm the only one. You look at verse number 10, and he said, I've been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, throw down thine altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword, and I, even I only am left, and they seek my life to take it away. Then in verse number 14, I have been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword, and I, even I only am left, and they seek my life to take it away. Man, I told you, church family, I told you last night, I remind West Valley that you and other churches in this state are here, because sometimes we get this small view that, man, we're the only ones. We're the only ones. And you forget that there's a pastor and a church family down in Twin Falls. You forget that there's a pastor and a church family in Jerome. You forget that there's a pastor and a church family here in Gooding and in Tremont and up in Coeur d'Alene and then wherever the people of God are, and they're assembling and reminding them. Man, it's so easy to begin to think that once you start believing the lie that my life isn't making any difference, you start to believe this lie that I'm the only one that really cares about God. And we can be guilty of that as pastors, and we can be guilty of that as churches, and we can be guilty of that as Christians. Well, man, my wife just doesn't love the Lord like I do. Or my husband just doesn't care about God like I do, or this community doesn't care, or we're the only ones. Listen, Solid Rock Baptist Church, you got to know that there are other churches. You're not the only people serving God. No, I understand it can get lonely. I understand you can get weary. I understand sometimes you wish more people would come or more people would respond or different things would be happening. But can I encourage you with this? You are not the only one. Pastor Beaver, you and your wonderful family, you are not the only ones. And it can get lonely sometimes and overwhelming. Like we went from a house to a basement, and it's just a different stage of life right now. It can be challenging, but you're not the only one serving God. And we can just get to look, man, I'm the only one. This is another thing about this. I'm the only one. I'm the only one that's ever struggled with this. Man, I love encouraging people with this. I love to counsel with people, and I love dealing with this issue. People come in, they're like, Pastor, I'm so ashamed to even talk to you about this. I'm so ashamed to tell you what's been going on. And without them ever telling me anything, I stop there and I say, listen, you are not a weirdo. Because we begin to think in the discouragement that we're the only one who's ever struggled with a sin. We're the only ones who have ever struggled with doubt. We're the only ones who have ever had a battle. We're the only ones who have ever made a mistake. We're the only ones who have ever gotten overwhelmed. To my preacher friends, to my Christian friends, to anybody who's here that's ever battled something, that you just kind of push it down and you're like, man, I'm just so ashamed and that I'm struggling with this or that I battle with this. You are not the only one. You're not the only one. And so Elijah is here in this place, and he's basically rendered himself useless, paralyzed himself by believing these two lies of discouragement. My life's not making a difference. Your life, your prayers, your investment are making a difference. And then he's believed the lie that I'm the only one that's going through this. I'm the only one that invests. I'm the only one that sacrifices, that tries. And if you believe these lies, it will destroy you or limit you. I'm just telling you, there are people who throw in the towel on Christ. I'm not saying they lose their salvation. I'm just saying they quit trying. Like, this doesn't make any difference. I'm the only one. There are pastors who get overwhelmed. Pastors' wives who get overwhelmed. There are ladies in a church and men in a church who get overwhelmed. They say, you know what, we're just the only ones, and we're just tired, and it's not making any difference. And you begin to be limited or to be destroyed. So here's the question: how do we respond? And I'll try to be quick on this, but how should we respond to that discouragement? Look, I believe this, that the best days of Solid Rock Baptist Church can be ahead of her. And any pastor who loves the work of God doesn't want the best days to be behind it. They want it to be ahead of it. And that's not a slight to Pastor Sansfield. That's what he wants. That's what Pastor Beaver wants. And if the Lord tarries his coming, there will come a day down the road when Pastor Beaver's not here. And he doesn't want this church just fading into the sunset. He wants it to keep going for Jesus Christ. I believe that. I want that for West Valley. I want that for the people of God. I want that for my own children. That the best days can still be ahead and you can see God work in amazing ways. But listen, you gotta understand how to respond when that discouragement begins to set in. When the lies begin to penetrate your mind that this is in vain and you're the only one and your life's not making any difference. So how do we respond? How do we survive it? How do we help others survive? Probably it's a good idea to see how the Lord responded to Elijah. And then how he responded is how we should respond. We have 8 kids and played different sports off and on, and we've homeschooled, and so it's not been consistently, but man, I grew up playing sports like crazy. Andrea did as well. And I'm an avid basketball player. I love basketball. Played a lot of baseball. Played a whole lot more basketball. Tried to play football, but like this pulpit, not manly enough for it, and broke a vertebrae, and so that was the end of that. So I love playing basketball. Well, when we play in the driveway, we're not there to have a good time. My kids can tell you this: Daddy doesn't mess around with sports. Like, you may be the only ding-dongs out here, but you're going to do this right. And whether it's a gymnasium with 2,000 people in it, whether it's a state tournament where you have people from all over the state there, or you're in your driveway, you're going to respect the game, and you're going to play it right. So I've produced a bunch of driveway all-stars. And here's what that means. They overestimate their ability because they haven't ever been like I have in a state tournament with people from all over the state. They just know the driveway. And so, man, we've got our 3 youngest boys here. We refer to them as the Stooges. Well, just above them, and that's an affectionate name, just above the Stooges is our 13-year-old daughter, Addison. Just above Addison are our 2 sons, Jaden, who's 14, and Jason, who's 16. And then above them are our first two daughters, Ashlyn and Alexandra. Well, Jaden and Jason are competitive and all of that stuff, and so they'll be out playing basketball. And man, Jason, especially Jason, he's so much fun, but dude, he is mouthy. And he needs God to bring him humility in his life. I'm just confessing my failures as a parent, and he is talking smack, and his mouth far exceeds his ability frequently. But I love it because he gets out there, and I don't intervene in this stuff all the time. I'm like, you just gotta take your knocks. And so the boys get out there and they're all playing. And man, Jason is just abusing his little brothers and talking the whole time. I mean, just running them into the ground. Like, don't bring that in here. Go home. Did your mama teach you how to do that? Well, yeah, she did. I'm homeschooled. I mean, it's just rough. It's over and over again. It's just smoking them. And you know, sometimes how as a dad, you let your kids score to affirm them a little bit. I mean, I've heard that's what dads do. I never did it, which is why that's what Jason does. And so Jason's just talking smack, and he's swatting people away. And then I'll come home from the office, and I'll pull up, and I can see it. Man, Justin's dejected. Jackson's crying. Jaren's sitting there yelling, and then like, Jason's being mean to us. And part of me loves it. Like, it's kind of funny because I've been through that. But then I'll start to defend the younger ones, and I'll say, good job, Jason, beating up on your 5-year-old brother. I can't tell you how proud of you I am right now. It's amazing that you have this level of skill. He's like, oh yeah, whatever it is. So I'll get on their team, and then I'll start swatting away Jason's efforts. I'll start doing to Jason what Jason was doing to them. Can I tell you, whatever the discouragement is, there is a God who is greater than the discouragement. And you don't always see him, but he's in your driveway. No, get it. He hasn't forsaken you. I love this. In chapter 18, the hand of God was all over Elijah. And some people conclude that when you get to chapter 19, I bet God was ashamed of Elijah. I bet God was embarrassed of Elijah. God's not a parent like we're parents. He is a perfect father. And when his children struggle, he does not distance himself from them. Look, that doesn't mean he approves of everything, but God does not distance himself from his children when they're going through a hard time and they are seeking answers and they are needing help. Look, if we're talking about the prodigal son, okay, that's a different story, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a child of God who is at a low point, and you can say, well, he shouldn't have been there. Well, he was there. He was in the battle, and the battle was hard, and there were challenges, and here he is. And the same God that had his hand and his power on him in chapter 18, I love this, sent his angel to touch him in chapter 19. Look at chapter 19. He lays down and he sleeps, and an angel touches him. I just want to get this point across, and then I'll give you a few things. And God, the same God that will enable you to serve him is the same God that will comfort you when you're struggling. You read in the text, the angel touches him twice. Have you ever, do you know what it's like to have a child who won't wake up? Like, I mean, some kids are just like up at the crack of dawn, like, I'm alive. It's like, go back to bed. Then other kids, it's like trying to, rouse somebody who's been under anesthesia for 8 hours. Like they won't, it's like shaking them. That's kind of how I am. I mean, Andrea has had to beat me to get me to wake up at times. Like I've slept through all kinds of crazy stuff. You know, the boys sometimes like Jaden, he's 14. I don't even try anymore. When it's time for him to get up, if he's not up, I just throw the blanket off, I grab his leg, I pull him out of the bed, he falls on the floor, and then he'll wake up about 3 minutes later. He's hard. God didn't come over there and like, get up, Elijah. Just put his hand on him. Hey, wake up. I got something for you to eat. And then he eats it and he goes back to sleep. And then he comes back. Hey, Elijah, you got a long journey ahead of you. I want you to eat a little more. God does not despise us when we are discouraged. Okay, so just keep these things in mind. I'll do this quickly. Number one, your conclusions during low or high times are usually inaccurate. You know what Elijah was doing? He was concluding things about his ministry and his life. I'm not making any difference. I might as well not be here. Just take me home. I'm the only one serving you. He was not seeing things clearly. Look, his work wasn't done. No, he was about to bring some other people onto the scene that were going to carry out the judgment of God and further the work of God. In particular, a young man named Elisha who was going to represent God after Elijah was taken up to heaven. Elijah's work was not finished. But we don't see things accurately when we're discouraged. So just assume this. When you're discouraged, that's not the time to make major life decisions. When you're discouraged about your marriage, that's not the time to make a major decision. When you're discouraged about things that are going on at a church, that's not the time to make an immediate decision. When you're discouraged about things that are going on with your health, that's not the time to make life-altering decisions. So, second thing, learn how to take care of the basics. In verse 5 and 7, he slept. In verse 6 and 8, he ate. You know, Pastor Sansfield touched on this. We as Christians do a really poor job of taking care of the basic things that God expects us to take care of. Look, and it's a shame when the world has a better handle on these things than the children of God have a handle on it. Look, I pray for our food, and I'm not trying to be sacrilegious here, but you say, God bless this food to my bodies. to my body, and I'm praying over Freddy's. No, I'm still grateful for it. No, I pray because I'm grateful, but it's like, I heard a comedian say one time, he's like, I pray for God to turn this Cheeto into a carrot stick on the way down. Like vegetable transubstantiation or something like that. Just somehow make this healthy for me because I don't have the discipline to be healthy. You understand what I'm saying? I had to do a case study when I was going through some counseling classes. And the study was on this man who was trying to do right and seeking God. But after several days, he was on the verge of making a very, very bad decision. And they told us to analyze all of the details and to state what the root problem was. You know what the root problem was? Turned out to be so simple. He hadn't slept in days. And we neglect ourselves. Can I tell you one of the things that has caused me that I've had to battle so much is the use of technology. We don't know how to put our phones down. We don't know how to turn the TVs off. We don't know how to turn the computers off. And just to lay there. I mean, Andrea has challenged me with this before. I'll be laying there at 11 o'clock or at midnight, and I can't sleep, and so I'll pull out my phone. And I'm not doing anything bad on my phone. I'll just pull out my phone, and I'm looking at my phone. And it's documented that stirs things up, and it prevents you. I'm just talking about basic things to help you. Get outside and look at the sunshine. Man, I'm serious. I whine at native Idahoans who don't like Idaho. What's your problem? You got mountains and the sun and some fog in our valley because we're trying to be like California and Boise. You got all kinds of stuff. It's amazing. It's incredible how you just get out and you let God fill you with some of his fresh air and you see a sunrise or a sunset and just breathe for a minute. Learn how to take care of the basics. Next thing, don't isolate yourself. I already mentioned this, verse 5 and verse 7. God did not keep his distance from Elijah. Look. We are meant to be relational.
Right.
We're meant to be relational.
That's right, brother.
You need each other.
Right.
And each other needs you. Man, I'm a bro hugger. I don't know if you know what that means, but I'm like, slap a hand, shaking like, what's up, bro? And I don't remember exactly the first time, but Brother Andy was ready for it this morning. But it didn't take me very long. I'm like, what's up, Brother Andy? Like, yo, dog, how we doing? Tuck it in here. It's a bro hugger. Why? I just like being in contact with God's people. I'm not trying to be weird about that. I mean, in the Bible times, they kissed each other. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about being in contact with one another. You're like, well, I don't like people. Maybe not, but you need people. And the fact that you don't like people doesn't change the fact that God likes people, and he made you to benefit from and be a benefit to. Listen, we hear about this at fellowship meetings. Pastors can attest to this. Pastors have a bad habit of isolating themselves. And we don't want to be transparent. We don't want to talk to anybody, or we're just so busy. And there are legitimate reasons for it sometimes. But we need interaction. Our families need the interaction. It's good for us. But that's not just true of pastors. That's true of anybody that's a child of God. And I get it that there are a bunch of bad things going on, but put down the news app for a minute and just go hang out with your neighbor. There's good stuff that God is still doing. Don't isolate yourself. God doesn't keep his distance from us. The next point, number 4, listen to God's truth. If you look in chapter 19, in verse 9, at the end of it, he's in a cave. And God asks him a question, what doest thou here, Elijah? And so he lays out his complaint and his evaluation. And so God says, go stand in the mount. And then God does these amazing things. But isn't it awesome that God wasn't in the earthquake or the fire? He was in that still, soft voice. Side note. You got to be willing to be quiet. We want God to compete with all the noise that we've created. We want God to compete. God, be as loud as this app. God, be as loud as this social media. God, be as loud as this event. God, be as loud as this. No. We're creating competition, but God doesn't play by our rules. Right. No, the God who is still wants to speak. We just occupied our minds with too much noise. Right. Hey, sometimes you just got to set it down. No, I wrestle with this. What if I miss something? I might, but it's not that. It's that. That still soft voice. So Elijah lays out his complaint, and then God speaks to him. And in verse 13, God asks him the question again. What doest thou here, Elijah? And Elijah responds the same way. But then notice this. Verse 15 through 18, God corrects both of the lies that Elijah believed. Number one, your life does have purpose, and here's the work you still have to do, and he lays it out. Number two, you aren't the only one. I have 7,000 that haven't bowed the knee. No, you may not know their names. You may not know what village or what hut or where they're at, but I have my people, even if you don't know about it. And then after that, just get this. After that, verse 18 to verse 19, Elijah doesn't say anything else. You know what that is? He let God have the last word. We need those verse 18 to verse 19 moments in our life where we just let God have the last word. You can always come up with why it's too hard. You can always come up with why it's not working in your life. You can always come up with why your life doesn't matter and why you're different and why your circumstances are so unique that God just can't do what he's done for others in your life. We always have something to say. One of my greatest struggles as a child, and the thing that caused my mom the most grief, was that I always had something to say to her, to combat. No, not to affirm her and to thank God for her, but to communicate to her why in my 13-year-old expertise that I knew that she was wrong and she didn't know better. Look, I was still getting spanked at 15. Like, you must have been out committing criminal acts. No, I thank God that I had a dad who didn't stop spanking me until I learned to keep my mouth shut. The last whooping, it wasn't a spanking. It was more like this pulpit. I was 15 years old, and you know what it was? I wouldn't shut my mouth with my mom. And my dad was like, you are not talking to her that way. I thank God for it. You know what our problem is? Sometimes we just won't let God have the last word. And we literally hang on to our anxiety and our depression and our discouragement because God, you don't know how bad this is. Instead of opening ourselves up to this, I love you, and I'm not through with you, and your life has purpose. Listen to God's truth. And then last thing, obey what God puts in front of you. Verse 19, look at it. So he what? Next few, he departed thence and found. And then he threw his mantle on him. And then he goes and begins the process of separating these kings that God told him to. Look, obedience to God is not an emotion. It's a decision to live by faith. You say, man, Elijah was so discouraged, but he could do the thing that God put right in front of him. Look, I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And I'm feeling really crummy. Are there some ladies in here that can relate to this? Man, I felt really crummy. Feel really crummy about how things are going at home. I feel really crummy about the laundry that never gets done. In a house with 8 kids, the laundry's never done. In a house with 1 kid, the laundry's never done. But with 8 kids, it's just never done. I mean, there's always dirty laundry. And then you homeschool, and then you have a husband who's as impulsive and like a squirrel on Red Bull. I mean, I'm just shooming. I'm like, babe, did I? And she's like, you told me this was the plan. And I'm like, I don't remember. Let's do something else. Man, it just gets overwhelming. And then as a family, you pour yourselves, hey, you pour yourselves into people. You have people in your home, and you go into people's homes, and you look them in the face, and you tell them, listen, if you make this decision, it is going to result in bad. And they're like, well, I'm going to make that decision. And then they're waking you up at 2:30 in the morning because they made the decision that you warned them from God that was going to result at that. And they want you to come and then bail them out. And the last thing you want to do is go bail them out. And yet you know, man, God, I've put you here for a purpose. And you better love them the way that I love you. So just do the thing that's right in front of you. Do the thing that's right in front of you. Two things. If you're discouraged, there's a God who doesn't give up on you. Walk yourself through these steps. Let God have the last word. Don't isolate yourself. Do what He's put right. Do what He has put right in front of you. The other thing is, be this to other people. You don't have to be a pastor to be an encourager. And as ministers, we ought to be encouragers. I want to encourage people's faith. Man, I'm so excited about what God can do. Look, our government is full of reprobates. You shouldn't say that, but it is. Right. Man, there are people using the healthcare system today to enrich themselves with no regard for the actual effects that their policies have on the lives of people. Man, we could go off on that all day. We could talk about the dishonesty in elections. Are you an election denier? No, I recognize the corruptness of bureaucrats that have for too long been entrenched in power without accountability. Oh, but wait, there is accountability. There's a God in heaven. And I love what you said, Brother Moore. We're not losing. No, the world is losing. God is still changing lives. Look, you say, well, is anybody ever going to be elected again? I don't know who's going to be elected. I do know this. Jesus is going to come one day. And people's lives can still get changed. So don't live in the discouragement. Don't live there. And try to help others not live there. We have a God. Don't be discouraged. Let's bow our heads and close our eyes. Julie, if you don't mind begin to play as soon as you get there. Let's stand together. With every head bowed and every eye closed, as she begins to play, would there be anyone who would say, there's something in my life that I've really struggled with. I've gotten discouraged over, and I'm just battling that. And it's not that I want to give up. It's just that I can't seem to get over it. And there's some specific things that God spoke to me about in this that I know I need to deal with. And I want God's help in that. Would you pray for me? Would there be anyone that raise you up? I see them going up. God bless. Yep, all over the place. I see them. So can we do this while our sister plays? Can we just respond to the Lord for a moment? Maybe you want to come to the altar. Maybe you want to kneel right there where you're at. But let's respond to God. If He gave us the courtesy of speaking to us, let's give Him the courtesy of a response. Let's talk to the Lord together. Pastor, I'll turn it over to you.